Digital Dissection, a nerd podcast, can at times contain adult language and themes. It is not intended for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Digital Dissection podcast, where we take a closer and possibly unnecessary look at our favorite properties, creators, and topics. We are your humble hosts, Joe and Mark, two pop culture nerds dedicated to telling entertainment history before it's forgotten too soon. Join us on Facebook, Twitter, and our blog for more information on the show. We also love to hear from you, so why not write us at digitaldissectionpodcast@gmail.com. And now that we've got that out of the way, let's get to dissecting. Yeah. We're going back tonight, Mark. We're going back pretty far. It's been a while. Like we've been tiptoeing towards this region for a while. We've been really comfortable in the early 2000s, but today we venture back to the 90s. We're dipping into 1997 tonight.
This would be the perfect time for the graphic of Robin Williams saying, "Yeah, what year is it?" What year is it? Can't remember.
Either that, or if we could somehow get an epic animated version of us running, and with the name of the podcast just rising behind us in 3D as the X-Men 1997 theme just started blaring.
Oh God, yeah.
Yep. Yep. Already done. I just went from 6 to midnight. We started way too soon. Way too hot. But yeah. So 1997 with yet another retro review tonight, as we review a movie tie-in that's technically not a movie tie-in because it came out 2 years after the movie it was tied into. So this is definitely one of those cases where like someone plays the game and it's like, oh, it's going to spoil the movie. And it's like, dude, you've had 2 years. Figure your shit out.
I'm going to say, man, it's 1995. I mean,
yeah,
it's your fault. That was the only entertainment we had. What else were we doing?
It's movies and video games, and that's it.
You know,
I mean, TV, this is still like the realm where like you probably got 3 stations if you lived in a rural area, and one of them is if you had a family member brave enough to stand on the roof and move the antenna in the right direction.
You know, when this game came out, my brothers and I actually hid certain channels on our TV when we used to live in the military base because we used to get the cable, Joe. The government paid for it.
Ooh.
And one time my dad was watching HBO, even though we hid it, he somehow just found it. You know, I think he heard somewhere. Yeah, he heard somewhere that it existed and he tried it. And he was watching Braveheart. And we walked down there and we go, Dad. And he doesn't know that we know that he knows. So it was like deception on all sides. Very much like a spy game.
Yeah.
And he's like, they were like, Dad, is that Braveheart? And he goes, no, that's a documentary on Braveheart. And we're like,
this does not seem like PBS to us, Dad.
Yeah, like everyone knows that everyone is lying to each other. It's the perfect like spy environment, which is why, Joe, I think it's very appropriate that we revisit Goldeneye 007, the 1997 hit on the N64.
Yes, because this game, like it was like the video game version of Monopoly where it could straight up end friendships and destroy families if you did this. I would say wrong, but not even wrong. Like you just got heated. Like, man, like this is, I think, like probably the first real multiplayer shooter that meant something. If that makes any sense.
Well, just think about the time period. I mean, if you were a young teen or even preteen, didn't really matter what age you were. Everybody was playing this game. I mean, it was everywhere, and some of us enjoyed the multiplayer experience quite a bit. Others played the game and loved it just as much. But it was kind of like what some people have equated to like the Apex Legends of today, or Overwatch of today, even though I think it's a little bit different, but that's probably the closest thing you could bring in an equal to,
Oh yeah. I mean, it's not too big of a difference going from character to character in multiplayer, except for one, and he's a fucking cheater, and we'll get to him later. But
throws a shoe, honestly. Yeah. Hey,
oh shit.
Before we dive in, we have some business to attend to, as we typically do on retro reviews. We want to make sure that you're not just aware of what the soup is. We want you to actually feel like you're sitting in it, stewing in there. Letting that
it's more than one
flavor.
ingredient in this video game soup or stew. You can't just have Goldeneye. You've got to pepper in some more spices and more flavors. Get some veggies in there with your beef. So this was not the only solid video game that came out this year. One we already did review, and that was Star Fox 64, which we did very much love.
Yep.
But other than that, we had what I think many would consider to be the finest of the Final Fantasies, and that is Final Fantasy VII. Even though it was far from the Final Fantasy, as we've continued on several times since then.
Yeah. It feels like someone's lying every time. Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like, it's clearly like we've talked about the difference between Japanese storytelling and Western storytelling, and that Japan doesn't give a fuck about continuity. They just want to tell a story. So you're like, but wasn't the first one the final one? And they're like, no, it's not. There's more.
Your finality means nothing to me. Yeah, it's like a couple arguing about like the husband going out drinking. It's like, no, honey, I swear this is the last one. And it's like, you said that 18 games ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Soup's a meal, sweetie. This is it. This is what you get.
Dude, I can't believe that one of these titles, Ultima Online, is still kicking. I mean, we covered this in our RPG series back in season 1, and how this is like one of the original like MMOs, and this stuff's still going, man. Can you believe that shit?
Just bizarre, considering like one of our favorite games with an online component was the Ghostbusters video game. And that got like what, a year and a half of online content, but we're like, no, we'll call it. We'll be done with this. And freaking Ultima Online is like, no, we're unstoppable. We just keep going.
The Ghostbusters online experience was only available for a short time for the PlayStation, but it actually lived on the Xbox for quite a bit longer.
Son of a bitch, Xbox.
We got robbed. We really did.
We did. Hosed.
Yeah, well, and then this is where the Grand Theft Auto series kicked off, was 1997.
Yep, this was the bird eye view Grand Theft Auto hanging out. So if you thought this whole thing started with a 3D experience, you were just a bit off. But also we have a great entry into the Castlevania series with Symphony of the Night, which, I mean, to my great disappointment, I found out was nowhere near the Ballad of the Night that would be Power of the Night in Critters. So, I mean, it was perfect. It could have been like there's monsters, there's scary things involved, Symphony of the Night, Power of the Night, and yet we get no Johnny Steele.
Just wasn't meant to be, Joe.
Robbed.
Unfortunately.
Totally robbed.
Yeah. Well, and then one of the other titles from this year that came out was Abe's Odyssey from Oddworld. And do you remember how like the Oddworld series somehow was like a major series that I felt like nobody ever played?
That was the thing too. Like I remember like seeing commercials for Abe's Exodus, and I'm like, we're still playing these games? I didn't even play the last one. Who the hell is this gent?
Yeah. Like we're over here going like, who the fuck is that? People in the UK are going, so this then? You know?
Yeah. Who's playing this here game? And it's probably Bezos, like with his like he wasn't rich at this time, but some sort of Bezos equivalent who's like, yeah, I know we're about to take that show off the air, but it's my favorite one, even though no one's apparently watching it. Let's keep it going. And someone with power just did that with the Oddworld series.
Yeah, seriously, I have absolutely no idea.
Yep. I got nothing.
Oh, but yeah, dude. So back to your original point, Goldeneye had already been out in theaters and distribution for 2 years by the time this video game comes out, which to me, I still can't believe it, because that felt like if we're talking about time travel, right? This didn't feel linear. I felt like the two had always been around.
I
Like
think,
time just felt
yeah.
fluid with the movie and the game, didn't it?
It did. And I think maybe it's just because, everything happened a little bit slower in the 90s. So we didn't have instantaneous anything. We did have to wait. So in this case, it's not like, you can binge things on Netflix because they'll just keep going, or you can stream the whole thing. It's like, no, you have to wait a week for the next episode. And in this case, it was, yeah, we got the movie 2 years ago, but the game wasn't ready. So we just kept going and we had to wait even longer.
I, and it's funny thing, it's not like the grosses were too low. The movie
No,
was quite successful, and the
very.
fact that the fact that an adaptation took 2 years, after that was incredible. But what I remember about this game that I really enjoyed, or about the movie, I should say, we're not going to review the movie today,
No.
but it was one of like the beginning of non Ian Fleming based,
Hmm.
James Bond stories. And this one I thought was really fun. I always enjoyed it because
Hmm.
yes, there's always something about the spy mentality. These spy movies, they always tend to
Hmm.
follow a certain track. We're kind of
Yeah.
used to it.
Hmm.
But there's something about this movie that felt darker. It felt like it had the necessary amount of spy game type of things in it, but at the same time, it just felt like a darker film. The story of it was great because you're introduced to, of course, James Bond 007,
Hmm.
but you're also introduced to Trevelyan, I believe his name is, who is, Sean Bean 006.
Yes. Hmm.
And so you have this relationship between spies that you haven't seen before,
Hmm.
and it's told in the shadow of like the last remaining possible breaths of the Cold War.
Yeah.
And so it just had a really solid feel,
Hmm.
and I think they translated it incredibly well to the video game. But yeah, just a great original story. So
It
we've
is,
got that
and
going
I
for us.
it is, and then this is the start of the Brosnan era of the James Bond movies, where, like you said, there was a bit of a darker grittiness to it, but at the same time, I feel like the Brosnan movies were a bit more playful in the fact that they emphasized different things as opposed to the previous ones, like the emphasis on like the gadgets being just completely over the top, over like how many things you can put in a watch and how many things you can somehow get into a this one, I think they were still using an Aston Martin. I think it's the next one where they switch him to a Jag, and we're like, wait the fuck a second, he doesn't drive Jags, he doesn't drive BMWs.
Yeah.
So it was a different feel. We got a different Bond in this movie. I mean, not entirely. He is still very much with women, with promiscuous and provocative naming. So that still happens. But yeah, we changed things a little bit with this Bond.
Yeah, and I got to say this too, that of the Brosnan films, this
Hmm.
was the only one worth watching. I'm
Yep.
sorry.
Hmm.
The rest of them were laughable, and we're not going to get
Yeah.
into that today. But
Hmm.
what we will get into is the fact that this game was made by Rare, the same
Yeah.
the same blokes that brought us the Donkey Kong Country series that we had talked about once again earlier this year. And so it's funny that they kind of come back into the fold here as we're a few years into the future. And really what I think folks may not realize. And Joe, this is due in part because once again I read the credits of these games.
Ever the reader?
Yeah.
Not for me. You and
Well,
your words.
hey, you know what? Some people did this. Maybe I used the whole cow when it came to the gaming experience, but
Hmm.
this game was directed by Martin Hollis,
Hmm.
and he's a Cambridge educated, basically like
Ooh.
computer science genius, guru,
Hmm.
developer, director, programmer. A lot of people that were attached to the development of this game gave Martin a lot of the credit for how it was developed, like how it came up, the initial concepts, right? What it was based on. And we'll get into a little bit of that.
Hmm.
But he is really the driving force behind this. Almost like how we talked about Russell T Davies with the Doctor Who reboot. Martin's kind of in the same seat doing this, but just for Goldeneye. And so he ended up working at Rare for quite a while. He actually worked on the coin operated version of Killer Instinct, which
Ooh.
you might remember. I told you a story. about my triumph with the coin-operated Killer Instinct.
Yes, that one fateful night at a bowling alley where Mark would find unexpected glory.
Just let it ride, baby.
Yeah.
Let it ride. Yeah.
So do you think at any point in time when Hollis was really trying to get this project going, people were like, I don't know, guys, it was a good movie, but it was 2 years ago. Maybe we should, look to the present or the future for this. And he would just insist that we keep going because I developed games at Cambridge. Like it was some sort of acting thing. Like it's the equivalent of doing Hamlet at Cambridge or something. Like this is where I am now. Trust me. Like, oh well, I mean, he's confident and he's English, so it should be fine.
He's got one of those capes that's over only one of his arms. It's like that guy's going someplace,
You know
Let's...
what this guy's got? Charisma.
Yeah. You see that guy over there? That's Martin Hollis. That guy fucks. Okay, just remember that.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude. Well, okay, so he's there at the ground level, whatever you want to call it, and the reason why this game actually takes a little bit longer than would make sense, right? It's not technically a movie tie-in. It's 2 years later. Well, at that point in time, Goldeneye was developed and conceived potentially as a 2D platformer for the Super Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were kind of going with this, like, all right, well, let's just make this like a side-scroller type of thing. We're on our last days of the system. We've put out some bangers with the Donkey Kong series. Maybe we could make this into something, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, it did not work out. It did not happen. Fortunately.
Yes.
Thank God.
Because I think we would end up with a rather forgettable game. Or if not forgettable, definitely not the milestone or the landmark that was GoldenEye for the N64.
I don't even want to think about it as a 2D platformer.
No.
Just get it out of here. Get out of here with that negativity.
We got enough of those.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's. I think it's equally a fun time, but also kind of depressing when you think about it. The Super Nintendo was a really, really solid console. There's a lot of fun titles. We talked about some of them on this program, and I'm not shitting on it. But at the same time, when the Super Nintendo kind of reigned supreme for a bit, and then we talked about that downfall until Donkey Kong Country kind of revived it a little bit. By this point, obviously, the Super Nintendo is deceased. Its body is no longer ready.
No.
Yeah, and the N64 is now taking over, so I'm fine with it.
Oh yeah, and especially, I mean, we never have gotten a slow-mo celebration of a child on Christmas Day with the Super Nintendo. It just didn't have the hype behind it like the N64 did.
No, but the hype that was building at this time, Joe, was the fact that they were talking about advanced AI. We're talking about some original story changes to the actual GoldenEye film, and really kind of paying homage to the series in a way by bringing weapons that we were, obviously remember, the Walther PPK, of course, being one of the most obvious. But these are all kind of things that they made sure the game obviously features, and none of it really takes away from the experience. Like, you're never overwhelmed by anything. It all kind of made sense where they placed it. But one of the weapons that I always laughed about, and a lot of people have made fun of course, is the Scorpion, otherwise known as the Clob.
The Clob. Yep.
Named after producer Ken Lobb.
Yes.
Yeah. Which the part of it that I think is a shame is that the Clob actually does have, like an armrest that's folded over the top of it. That's meant to, fold back and then, hold like a rifle. But of course, it's like a wet fish as a gun, it's just, it's all over the place. There's no use for it.
No.
It's too bad. But yeah, ultimately though, GoldenEye 007 begins as a Virtua Cop type of game. Like, that's what they were conceiving this as, Joe. Now, did you ever play Virtua Cop in the arcades back then?
Love the Virtua Cop in the arcades. So, I mean, if they could have captured that, it would not have been horrible, but still, not the game we got, and for the better.
I completely agree with you on that. I mean, there's some value to some on-rails shooters like that, like Virtua Cop or Dino Crisis or, Area 51. Like, those games they were all fun, but I don't think they were
Yeah,
ever made to be played at home. Those are meant to be played
that's
so that
the
you waste your
thing.
quarters.
Exactly. And that's if they try to bring that into the house, it just isn't going to work. If they would have kept it where they did Goldeneye as an arcade, I mean, it could have done well. Um, but at the same time, I don't think it like being able to play this at home with multiple friends and not burn through like an entire like month's allowance worth of quarters. Yeah, it's that's the way to do it. Well, because when we hit the 90s, like the age of the arcade is definitely at its like on its deathbed. So
Yeah.
it doesn't hit like it would have in the 80s.
No, and this game was meant to hit differently, and there's a couple of reasons why. Now, one of the that we talked about the AI impact in this game, right? Well, part of that was fueled by this specific system development that they did where and you'll notice this if you go back and play the game. I never realized this the first time I played it. Whenever you fire a gun or shoot at something in the game, try to think of it in if you've ever done like one of those breathing exercises where like it shows like the little graphic where your breath, rises and falls and the little like polygons kind of come in and out like this, like almost like a flower, right?
That's like a Le Mans thing, right? That's what that is. You've done that before, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean
yeah.
you said someone as a father. I assume you said in those classes, and I have not experienced this sort of breathing test,
Yeah.
so that's all I can think of. Is it must be
Eh,
Le Mans.
Well, and that's a good
Le
way to
Mans.
visualize it for people that can't see the video version of this. That I just use my
Mm-hmm.
hands to make like this little door hinge thing. But that's kind of what the AI was trained to do in this game was that if you ever fired your gun or explosions or whatever, think of it like that growing effect, right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
each time you would shoot a gun, right, it would do this thing where the impact is felt, it'll die down a little bit, but if you fire too many times, that impact just grows outward even more. And so anything within that field that notices it is going to come running, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
you can go if you're using your silencer and you shoot somebody and you're quiet about it, that field becomes that much smaller. But if you're like me and
Stealth is
you
always optional.
yeah, you have the maneuverability of a pontoon boat, well, then you start to realize, holy shit, there's a lot of people in this level. So it's a really interesting way to develop a game. I thought it was cool
Mm-hmm.
at first. I didn't obviously once again know this the first time I played it, but upon additional viewings, additional helpings of this game, I did start to notice that if you were actually stealthy, it did pay off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Believe it or not.
I mean, it is a probably one of the toughest pills to swallow. That being sneaky is the most effective way to be a spy ever. Um, because I mean, in a much later world, um, when I remember watching my friend Oz play Hitman in college, where he basically would fuck up endlessly and be caught doing a job and would have to then murder as many things as he could in the level. That was just always more fun to me. It's
Yeah.
like, well, now we have to shoot everything because we messed up the stealth, and that's my philosophy. Just fuck stealth and just blow it all away. But when you're a spy, the whole espionage thing is meant to be hush hush and a bit of a secret. So it was the right way to go for this game, making it so there was a benefit to actually being quiet. Not that like it was impossible to do it our preferred way, but it was way better, way better for you if you actually tried to be a spy.
And for the most part, you were able to navigate levels, with some stealth like applied. Yeah, you could get through most levels unless there's a timer. Of course, there are in a couple levels.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the early levels in the game, which was like the gas lab level, where you see unfortunately Trevelyan get shot in the face, and
Yeah, poor
hardly knew you.
Demosis. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that red gas comes in. Well, that level was one of the first ones designed that had that on rails potential experience behind
Mm-hmm.
it. And if you think about that level, Joe, it is really kind of close together. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's the effect of like reaching into the peanut butter jar and your knuckles get scraped with with that peanut butter on every single inch. It's kind of like that. Like it's a very closed together experience, and it was on purpose because you were originally supposed to just kind of navigate through this. Stealth didn't matter at all,
No.
So when people go back and play that level again, just kind of look at the design of it, because it's not meant to be open exploration or any of that stuff. It's fairly linear, very close together.
Yep. And do you think when they were designing that, and right when our 006 died, they just thought, you know what? I think this is going to happen a lot for this guy in the future. We're going to take our time to make sure this really, really works, and you can see Sean Bean die in our game.
Yeah, because he doesn't die enough, does he?
No, he does not. But I mean, I don't think he will die anymore.
Yeah.
I think after Game of Thrones, he was like, "Fuck this! My career's becoming a joke. I will not. I will not appear in a film where I have to die ever again."
For me, I think this was one of the first times I actually noticed him dying in something, because I hadn't seen a ton of. This was like long before I became a cinephile or whatever the name is now.
That just sounds dirty.
I know. Sounds like it carries probation and an ankle monitor, but whatever.
Yeah.
But either way, so that's really what we're looking at. You've got this game that has some different concepts kind of brewing within it, and one of the other ones that remains in the game that I do think is ridiculous is that you can see through windows and you can shoot at things through windows, but nothing else can actually see through them back at you. This was intentional. They intentionally did that.
I just assumed all windows were just like a two-way mirror sort of scenario, where it's like, nope, or one-way mirror. It's like, nah, we can see through this, but no one sees in.
Well, essentially, that's what the effect was. Because if you ever look through this game again, and if people go back and revisit it, nothing can see you through windows. So the developers did this on purpose to encourage, once again, that stealth style of exploration. In hindsight, it's kind of ridiculous. It's like, you could see me clearly.
Yeah, you could see me. It's like the classic. There's a guard, and you just have to do something, just barely get by him, and he knows there's something's there, and so he just goes, there's something prowling around out there. And you're like standing right behind him, but he just will never know you're there, because you're in some sort of bizarre blind spot that is just, like for any normal human being wouldn't be there. So just seconds later, after him now no longer being able to see through the window, just must have been the wind, and he's just right back to doing what he's doing. Yeah.
Yeah, which at this point in time, these games really didn't have that kind of, well, at least the cartridge games didn't really have that kind of voiceover capability.
No, they did not. No.
Yeah. It was very much like every Lego game where people are just like, huh? Huh? Yeah. There was no voice acting, so it is what it is. But
it is. But yeah, I had to throw in some Viva La Dirt League there for a second. It was too brilliant of a time to pass up.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I wanted to spend some time on this specifically because I don't think a lot of people realized just how different video game development was roughly 25 years ago compared to what it is now. Because we talked about, Hollis, right? Being the director. Well, initially, he only had like 3 other people working on this game with him. So there was Mark Edmonds, the programmer, Carl Hilton, who was like doing all the background and art design for that. And then there was B. Jones, who was the character artist. And so these guys built out the concept on their own. And
they had to get to work uphill both ways, walking every morning to program this game.
Yeah, in the snow.
Naked. Nothing but a potato to warm them.
Yeah. Well, it's just actually kind of funny that you mentioned that. So they didn't actually have like N64 software development kits to work with. So they had to use this like outdated, we'll just sum it up as basically like a beat up old GameCube, essentially, as like the test environment for this original build.
So somewhere PlayStation's getting mad at them, being like, Mark Edmonds did this in a cave with scraps.
Yeah.
Well, we're not Mark Edmonds, sir.
Yeah. Exactly. In a cave with a bunch of scraps. Well, they essentially did, man. Like when they were actually blown away when they did finally get their hands on N64 tech, because they had been working in this environment that was so restrictive. They had to do the best they could with what they had. And then they finally get into the N64 environment and they're like,
whoa,
what's this?
What?
What is this? You know?
We could have had this the whole time?
Hey,
yeah.
You know, I think what this really goes to show is the ingenuity and what people can accomplish when they don't have everything that they, could possibly have for resources. And case in point, they added multiplayer with 6 months remaining before the release of the game.
I mean, nowadays, granted, the complexity of the modern video game is much more than what it used to be. And with the level of even the visuals, it blows everything away. But this is something where if that was done today, like it just wouldn't release with the title and it'd be DLC months down the line.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What I thought was interesting about it was Edmonds was playing around with it and they said, yeah, see what you can build us here. And he essentially just took the single player logic and tried to apply it to the multiplayer environment and really just copy paste it 4 times or 3 times, however many people are playing.
I mean, if the teacher doesn't care, just do it. It's fine.
Yeah, right.
Just copy and paste away.
Hey, this isn't plagiarism. He made it originally, right? So it's not even homage at that point. It's just, using your work effectively. So
exactly.
So yeah, dude. Like Rare, I think once again, this is one of those home runs when you take a dedicated group of people, very intelligent people, and you don't get in their way, and you give them creative license, because that's what happened. Like they worked really closely with the producers and the studios behind Goldeneye. They took actual set photos, costumes, photography, and all that stuff, and they applied it directly into the game. So I thought they did an incredibly good job from that angle.
Exactly, because like this is again like it's a movie tie-in, and I think a few movie tie-ins really stand out in the video game world. Like I can think of this and Spider-Man the movie being great like tie-ins where you get to do like the things that were your favorite parts of the movie, so you feel like you are in the movie. But then they even add little extras that just extend the story for you to enjoy it even more. And this is one of those games where again it felt cool while playing it because like you could be a spy even though you live in the Midwest and will never probably ever be a spy. So this is the closest you get to it, and it does a great job of making you feel that way.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, Joe. Like, what is the core experience of GoldenEye 007? Can you explain just the overall approach, like how the levels work? Like just let's just kind of break that down for folks.
Yeah, so I mean, you have like basically linear based levels. So you could say it's basically a sandbox. You have these 3D environments, but you have specific areas where you have to go and areas where you cannot go. You have varying levels of difficulty, like every game at this point in time would, and they do have fun with the names. You don't get easy, medium, and hard. Instead, you get agent, secret agent, and if you were daring and bold, you went 00 agent. So you got that license to kill, which again, it's one of those things where even like having that fun naming changes like your attitude towards playing the game, because a lot of games it's like, you know what, I'm going to play it just to play through it and have the experience. Others like, you know what, I am going to just play through so I'm not, it's challenging but not frustrating. But this is the game where just by doing that fun like changing of the difficulty, you kind of cop an attitude if you're the 00 agent and your friend's just an agent. It's like, oh, you're an agent. Whoop-de-doo. That means you do what? That means you can go get the rent-a-car for me. You're going to pick up my Aston Martin, take it through the wash, give it to me so I can go kill some bitches. Yeah. You're an agent. Good job for you. They sell insurance. I can kill people. So that was part of the fun to this game. And on top of that, even having the I don't know the name of the process, but it looks like they took a picture of the actors and just kind of wrapped it around something. It stretched it a little bit, but it worked, and you could see that they were there, which again adds to the whole like not only are you a spy, but you're a famous spy because you're doing the same spy stuff that was done in the movies.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now on the topic of difficulty, what I thought was really cool here is that
Mm-hmm.
the the producers, developers of the game, we mentioned Virtua Cop was one of the influences. So was Resident Evil to an extent,
Mm-hmm.
and then so was Super Mario 64.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned that linear style of gameplay, yes, it's true. For the
Mm-hmm.
most part, you have a start and an end to each level. Can't really debate that part.
Mm-hmm.
But on Mario 64, now for those that maybe haven't played the game in a long time, you go into one level and you have potentially 6 to 7 different objectives in it to be able to obtain the stars necessary to advance to the
Mm-hmm.
next, part of the game. Well, the difficulty kind of used that same subject or that same idea. And so if you played Agent, for example, you might just have to go A to B,
Mm-hmm.
pick up an item or two along the way,
And you're good.
and move on with your life. Yeah,
Yeah.
but if
Yeah.
you're at double
Maybe run to the store for some milk. But not asking for too much.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But don't get skimmed. God damn it.
No,
You
that's
get the right kind.
skim is just water lying about being milk. It's fucking disgusting.
But it's true though, man. Like that's what the difficulty provided, right? Like it was a chance to not just make the overall experience more difficult, but then you also had, like we said, you pick up a key card,
Mm-hmm.
download data from a computer, right? Disable all the alarms. And if you failed at these things, then it would lower your overall score at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Mission failed. So I gotta say, I did end up playing the games on Double O Agent. We did end up unlocking some cool things.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't easy.
No. Mm-mm.
but that's how they treated this game. Like you were rewarded for doing these different difficulties
Yeah.
because there were cheat codes.
Mm-hmm. And also part of that again, the fun of that bygone era of gaming is that the whole game is on the cartridge, and to unlock what would normally be behind a paywall in modern gaming, you just have to do progressively more difficult things in the game to get it, to earn it. And this
Yeah.
was part of that fun where like these days, like it sometimes just feels like you're grinding to get gear or to get an experience. But back then, it was a legitimate challenge to get these extra playthroughs, to get these extra items, to get things that were even something as simple as like even thinking like Mario Kart 64, you had to beat everything, every cup at 150 cc's to get the brand new like little title screen. It's like, aha, you turn it on, you have that title screen. That's a flex to your buddies who couldn't do it. So same thing here. You get to earn these different perks of the game by beating it on more difficult settings.
Yeah. Well, and the
Mm-hmm.
cheat codes, we obviously being invincible is a really obvious one. It's difficult to
Yep.
get. But
Mm-hmm.
this is where people, almost everybody got their hands on DK mode, where you could
Oh
have
yes.
massive heads and,
Mm-hmm.
and arms and all that. My favorite, because I would play this game at people's houses all the time, I would always want to go for paintball mode. I just really enjoyed paintball
Mm-hmm.
mode, unlocking that because it was so
Oh yeah.
silly. Yeah, and so like it became kind of a challenge within a challenge, right? Like you talked about, like this is a full ass game. You're not getting
Mm-hmm.
half-assed content. Like
No.
everything's
Mm-mm.
there so long as you were able to face the challenge.
Yeah.
So
And it's all kind of wrapped in this kind of bad to worse atmosphere though, which also makes it fun is because you're never really comfortable. You get this fog of the Cold War that the game is set in. The in-game fog effects and this really dreary sky are kind of always above you. So on top of like the fun, it kind of almost grounds itself in this grittiness from level to level.
yeah, I definitely agree with you because this was that era of gaming where unfortunately fog is used as a means to cut corners on processing power.
Yes.
You know, like if so many games back then was like, yeah, you had like 10-foot visibility in like every game you would turn on. And Goldeneye was a little bit more of an exception. I mean, you still had that game fog, but it was further away. But
Yeah.
like you mentioned, there are other, like, it just made the stakes feel so much higher when you're playing in a level where like the sky is just really dark, or it's in some cases it's like red. I don't know if you remember the surface level where like the sky is literally red.
Yeah.
And
Shit's going down up there.
yeah, you just don't feel comfortable at all playing that. I mean, it creeped me out, and I love that game. but I mean, it's true though. I mean, there's another level where you're playing in the streets of St. Petersburg, and you hop in the tank, right, and all that. And that level is in that same type of like pandemonium. Like it's now that level. Some people who have played this game religiously might go, fuck that level, because it's really easy to get lost in the streets of St. Petersburg, and you're on a timer as well. So it's
it
like,
all looks the same. Everyone speaks Russian. You got nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's got dash cams, and no one's afraid to back down from a fight. So you're kind of fucked no matter what you do.
And bears everywhere.
Yeah, on tricycles or on unicycles.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I really do think that's one of the strengths of this game. I mean, we are used to video games now, Joe, where we feel invincible.
Yeah.
Right. Like we just talked about Ezio Auditore and Assassin's Creed, and how he's like a one-man army. James Bond, for as effective a killer as he is, and he will kill again.
He will.
But he's only got one health bar going into these levels, and there's no way to recover your health.
No, and on top of that, you've got one joystick to move him around.
Yeah.
Like it's not this is pre-strafing world. So you've got the difficulty of one, not having the health available to you, and two, the mobility that you're like, if you go back and play this game and you haven't done before, the mobility you're used to is much harder to achieve in GoldenEye than it is in a modern first-person shooter.
Yeah, it's nowadays we'd call it clunky, but back then, I mean, it was much different. A lot
Top
of us
the
were
line.
Yeah, we were used to platformers and third-person games. We weren't really used to this level of detail being available in a first-person experience.
Yeah,
and for that sustained period of time.
No, because I mean, like, I think for most people, like the most solid first-person shooter experience they had prior to this would have been Doom. And I mean, not to say that like there obviously were others. I think Turok was around at this time. That was a first-person shooter. I don't know if the Duke Nukem titles were out for the PlayStation yet at this time, but those were games where, like, if you didn't have access to them and getting like a regular amount of games at the time, you probably had Doom before this, and this is quite the jump from Doom.
Yeah, well, and it's even quite the jump for Turok. I mean, I had Turok. I enjoyed that game, but even for as good as it was, it felt a lot clunkier in comparison to this. And so that's why I think while people still love Turok, it was a well-received game.
Yeah.
This is the much more polished, and the much more professional-looking experience, and so either way, I think one of the strengths of the game, though, because we talked about how it's a movie tie-in, right? Quote unquote. Well, it takes a lot of liberties with the storyline of the movie. And once again, I know we mentioned we're not here to talk about the movie itself, but let's just take one level as an example. So the very first level, the dam level, where James Bond, he's trying to infiltrate this secret Russian facility, and in the movie, it's a pretty quick sequence. Like he drops in, sets up his little zipline thing, and he jumps down into this dam. Well, the dam level, you start off, you infiltrate it, right? But there's a ton of other things that you can do before you jump off the dam at the end of the level. And you and I have talked about this as it's a route through the difficulty. You can download, data and stuff like that. And so yes, it's familiar if you've watched the movie and you were just a fan of it. but they fill out a lot of stuff in between that you can do. And
Yeah.
so I applauded it for that. Still do hold it in high regard because
Mm-hmm.
movie tie-ins are frankly pretty shitty.
Usually, like we're talking 9.5 times out of 10. You've got a
Yeah.
really narrow window of good movie tie-in games.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah,
They're
it's. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's even like because like at the same time, like you can understand. Like I don't want to say understandable, but like we have heard from other people that like before like now movie tie-ins like the actors like taking their role from the movie and doing a video game with it is a fun thing for them now, but it wasn't always that. And part of that had to do with the fact that like the games were usually shit. So actually having the actors like be in them like they usually most of the time I imagine like were contractually obligated to be there, and they didn't really enjoy it because they knew the games were going to be crap, they were barely going to get played. But this was one of those rare cases where the movie tie-in, I'm sure if Pierce Brosnan could have voiced it, if that was an ability or something that you could have had at the N64, if he would have played it, I think he would have happily voiced it because this was just an incredible experience overall.
and you did mention the almost like the ironed on face effects,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to remember we have the benefit of 25 years of gaming since then,
Yes.
and at the
Mm-hmm.
time that looked really good to
It
us.
did. It really did. It's like, oh my God, that's actually James Bond up there. It's
Yeah.
not just a series of really rigid facial structures and triangles that are making up our James Bond. It's like, no, that's Pierce Brosnan's face.
Yeah. That's not just like,
Mm-hmm.
10 different polygons colored differently. It's like, no,
Mm-mm.
no, no, that's a scanned face of an actor
Yeah,
placed over a
yeah.
3D model.
I know that guy. I've seen him before.
But it's the truth though. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why this game is a triumph in many ways, because it is a first person shooter, as we've mentioned. But to your point about how Goldeneye really ramps up the gadget usage, one of the most fun things to do in this game was taking, James Bond's watch, his little laser watch, and shooting off like the metallic things that are sealing doors and stuff. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it was also the fun of taking, uh, like mines that you could detonate, from a distance.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, sure, we've had elements like that in other games before,
Mm-hmm.
but as a James Bond character, it was executed really well.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a reason why it still holds up now.
Exactly. There's nothing like knowing that that tube of toothpaste is actually C4 explosive and that the floss is actually garrote wire. Uh, so it's just pure on spy stuff, or you think it is, but then it turns out that the floss is actually just floss and the toothpaste is just toothpaste. And there have been tremendous advancements in the field of dentistry since the 1960s. So just
Yeah,
lots of fun spy things here.
yeah, yeah. Now there is one thing about this game that I do want to deliver a fuck you to, and that would be the last level of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Now in the James Bond, in the GoldenEye 007 or GoldenEye movie, in the level they call it the Cradle, which is like this big satellite, structure that's over
Yes.
this like
Mm-hmm.
massive, cement thing in the middle of Cuba. And in the movie, a lot of people remember it. This is where, Trevelyan and Bond fight each other again,
Mm-hmm.
and Bond catches him over the edge of the platform, and he's like, "For England, James." He's like, "No, for me." And it's like just dripping with '90s goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the cradle in the video game, it is the hardest fucking level of all time. And even on like the
Mm-hmm.
the lower levels, it's like, yeah, okay, the lower levels, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's just not terrible.
Yeah.
But if you're
Yeah.
trying to get cheat codes and
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to do anything with this, doesn't matter what difficulty it's on. When you get to the end of the cradle level, you have to get down to that platform that they depict in the movie. Half the time you go falling off of that thing. Other times you get down there and like Trevelyan sometimes
Mm-hmm.
is doesn't even appear.
Yeah. It
and then
just
he's like, and then
glitches.
he's like right in front of your face. I
Mm-hmm.
can't tell you how many times, Joe, especially on higher difficulties, that I played that level and I jump down to the platform at the end, and I go flying right the fuck off.
Oh yeah, I mean it's one of those cases where you fuck up so much playing it that you start to get rid of like the suspension of belief that like obviously like this whole thing is like based off of a movie that's fictional and there's no way this would ever happen, and you're sitting there like there's no fucking way OSHA would ever let this shit not have handrails. I should not go flying off anywhere. Where is the regulation? Someone sue these people. It's to the point where you get overly rational as a child because you are now irrationally angry
Well, that
over how
level is
much
so
it screws up.
that level is so hard, and
Mm-hmm.
Trevelyan, who's the bad guy, you chase him throughout the entire level. Now, if you're like cheating and you're really, got all the codes turned on, his health meter does have like a certain amount of hit points that if you just like shoot him with like the RCP 90 for
Mm-hmm.
the duration of the level, you could
Yep.
technically kill
You
him
just
before you
kill
even
him.
get to
Yeah.
the end. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you
But
skip all of it.
yeah, well, and then you could then you
Mm-hmm.
could effectively skip
Yep.
all that crap. But if you don't do that, it can be a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
and that's how most of us had to play it, was
Mm-hmm.
without cheat codes. And so even though the last level of the game is a pain in the ass, I think the stakes are where they need to be. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very stressful level,
Yes.
but I
Mm-hmm.
just remember that, dude. I remember constantly hating on that level.
Yeah. And I mean, every once in a while, like not every once in a while, but a lot of times in video games, you can play a very challenging level like that and walk away with a feeling of accomplishment. This is one of those times where it's absolutely not that, and you walk away being like, "Fucking shit! Why did I do that? Like I could have done. I should have just went outside. Like I did not have to do that."
Yeah, which is oddly
Mm-hmm.
enough how some people felt after playing the multiplayer when their friends picked Oddjob as their character.
Oh, fucking odd job, man! Like that was like definitely like if you had a group of friends who didn't have a ban on Odd Job, like you were masochists and you enjoyed the hurt. You
Yeah,
enjoyed the pain that came with playing against someone who was Odd Job. Because I would definitely remember playing with friends and be like, if you fucking pick Odd Job, you play one game and you're out the rest of the night. You get one. You're not doing it again. Because he was bullshit. He was absolutely bullshit. So if you're not familiar with Odd Job as a character, he throws his hat at people in the movies, and that's how he kills people. Ridiculous premise. Again, part of the whole like Brosnan ridiculous era. He's the kind of part of the start of that. So he's also a shorter human being, and in this game, he is laughably short compared to all of the other characters. And he's so short to the point where the game mechanics that are built in to try and make it so it's easier to manage, like there's basically an auto aim feature in this, where if you're close enough, the crosshairs of your gun will naturally sort of drift towards the target. And this is true in a lot of video games. It's still there. And a lot of times, like again, like the auto aim feature can almost fuck you over sometimes in modern video games.
yeah,
But it really did that with Oddjob, because instead of like going down to his head, it would just force you to move above his head and swing past him. And it's like
yeah,
you can't, like you have to now fight this auto aim fast enough so whoever is fast enough so that the person who is Oddjob can't kill you before you
yeah.
can compensate for the auto aim fucking itself up. And I actually believe in 2018, the programmers of this game actually came out and said if you use Oddjob, you were absolutely cheating.
Yeah.
You were definitely cheating, because they even said that like when we were programming this and we were testing it, we were playing it, everyone agreed that it was unfair. But
Yeah.
it was just like one of those things. Like here's the thing: he is unfair, but it's one element that can be in the game where you're with your friends, and along with all the degrading remarks you're going to throw at each other and the things you do to each other's mothers, because that's just how we play video games.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um, and you're going to be physically jarring and verbally jarring each other. This is going to add to that experience and just kind of make it more fun for everyone. So there's no way we're taking them out.
I was gonna say most of the time it was like whoever the shittiest player was in your friend group got to play Oddjob, and
Yep.
then they felt like they
Mm-hmm.
had a chance.
Yes, and then when they would kind of cop an attitude about it and stop being Oddjob, then they get their asses handed to them. Like, oh, maybe I'm not as good. I'll go back to being Oddjob.
Yeah, that was street justice back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
well, well, either way,
Mm-hmm.
in the spirit of most games that we talk about here, we don't want to give away everything, but we do want to let you know a little bit about the history, a little bit about the experience itself and why we liked it,
Yeah.
which
Mm-hmm.
leads us into review time, Joe. It's time
Rating
to start.
time.
Yes, give out some scores. And we start off, of course, with the graphics. Now, Joe, where did the GoldenEye 007 work for you in terms of graphics in 1997?
In 97, because here's the thing. Like we mentioned before, it's definitely it doesn't hold up in modern day looking at the graphics of the faces of the characters and seeing that kind of pressed on effect sort of thing. It is like the equivalent of your grandmother sewing you a sweater on Christmas with like your initial like on it, like Ron Weasley style. It doesn't hold up and it's not flattering. But if you're really young, you kind of dig it and you're okay with it. So in this case, we were really young. It doesn't look great now, but we were young enough and we appreciated the amount of realism that was there. And that it wasn't just a series of triangles moving around and doing things. So for 97, I'm going 4.5 golden guns as we'll be
Nice.
using this time
That's
out of
right.
5.
We skipped right over the unit of measurement. It is going to be the golden gun, the
Mm-hmm.
one shot kill. Uh,
Yes.
unless it's against Baron 70 in the bonus level
Mm-hmm.
where you have to shoot him like 4 times with the golden gun.
Which
But
I mean,
either way.
it's fine. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm in agreement with you on the graphics side of things. And the reason why I want to bring it up is because we've talked about Star Fox 64 coming out in the same year.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing goes for Turok. Turok came out in 1997 too and was also a first person shooter, much different looking game,
Yeah.
right?
Agreed.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give it a 4.5 as well because
Boom.
I'm not going to rate it against today's games. It's not
Mm-mm.
fair. But when you look at the
No.
field back then,
Mm-hmm.
like Star Fox 64 was a good looking game,
Yeah. Very
but
good looking
GoldenEye
game.
makes Star Fox 64 even look bad.
Mm-hmm.
So, but just from a graphic standpoint.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
absolutely. It's like it was somehow next gen, but within the same gen.
oh yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. It
Yeah.
felt that much different. And so,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to gameplay, I'm going to also rate this one pretty high because
Mm-hmm.
the gameplay for the time was revolutionary. And
Yeah.
I was in a household that played a ton of Doom and Wolfenstein 3D. We would eventually play, Quake and Heretic and all these other games like Unreal.
Mm-hmm.
And GoldenEye, from a gameplay standpoint, was, I mean, just so structurally sound. There was only a couple places, like we talked about, where the game really gets kind of shitty,
Mm-hmm.
and,
Yeah.
and that's near the end. But
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, the gameplay was great, and it was the right combination of, like we talked about, there's some stealth oriented things you need to do,
Mm-hmm.
there's objective driven things, there's timed elements of it. And so it never really got to the point, for the exception of one one follow quest
Mm-hmm.
early in the game that just sucks. I hate having to follow companions.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, it was a varied and interesting game that allowed you to do what you wanted to do to get from A to B for the most part. Like, it was linear, yes, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of stuff for you to do along the way. So for me, I'm going to give this a 5.0, man.
Yeah.
Gameplay was solid.
Mm-hmm. No, I cannot argue against that on this at all because you went over everything that was great about like especially the single player version of this, the story mode. And like you said, there are a few deters to that, but a lot of it is just some of it is just because they did make it difficult on purpose, and others are because well, it did glitch here and there, and that was not fun. Uh, but I think where this definitely makes up for that is in the multiplayer because that was such a great experience that if you had some frustration in the main story mode with, 006 not showing up like he was supposed to, or you went flying off of the cradle, you could take it out on your friends, and everything was better after that.
Yeah.
So this is again for me because of just the amount of fun I remember having playing this game is 5 golden guns out of 5.
I thought you were going there, but I didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
fill in the chart here before that point. Which, I honestly, Joe, your last point I think really
Mm-hmm.
plays into replay value, which
Yeah.
would be our next
Mm-hmm.
metric. Yeah, what
Yeah.
do you want to say about replay value?
Same. Like this was like I remember like I college rolls around and we had LAN parties with Halo like I think every week, every Thursday, and those were some of the funnest parts of my first like year of college. But before that was this: you had Goldeneye nights with your friends, and of course you couldn't like link up your 64s together. You were limited to have 4 people playing at a time. But that was also just part of the fun, is that you could get your friends together. If you had more than 3 friends and you were that cool, you could like swap out, like lowest kills gives up their sticks, so you
Yeah.
can move players in and out and keep people playing. And you had Goldeneye nights before you had Halo nights. And this was one of the, I think, one of, if not the first experience where it was we got our friends together to have video game nights because of this game. And because of that, and how much I do remember going back and playing it and enjoying it, this is another 5 golden guns out of 5 for me.
I don't blame you for it, man. When it comes to the replay value of this game, I remember my friends loving multiplayer because we obviously did the same thing, man. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I was on the other side of the country doing this exact same thing with my friends. And so the multiplayer, yeah, was definitely a big part of it. But
Mm-hmm.
then we also went back and would replay the single player and
Mm-hmm.
see who could do, double O agent the quickest, or who can beat this level the fastest, or who can do it with the best time and the most amount of headshots.
Yeah,
Because
speed
there's
running
so
before
many.
they were speed runs, man.
What, dude? There are so many different stats at the end of it that you could do that
Mm-hmm.
with, and so I mean, we were just all over every mechanic of the game. And dude, I remember we didn't have like the executive like whiteboard and trying like, or like the NFL draft room kind of thing where you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to map out how to get the cheats and all that. We
Yeah.
got pretty damn close, man. Like we were sitting there trying to go, okay, here's what we gotta do to get to this. How do we do this? And a couple of my friends and I went back and tried to hit all the cheats, unlock every single thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there was so much here to do. And once again, this was a full assed game to play.
Yeah.
So for me, the replay value incredibly high, 5.0
Mm-hmm.
out of 5.0, which brings us to the metric that has made or basically make or break for some of the games that we've
Mm-hmm.
reviewed. GoldenEye
Music.
007, dude, is one of those video games that once again, I can't name
Mm-hmm.
every track of the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I can do is recite almost every piece of music from this game,
Mm-hmm.
in my head. And every single one is a banger.
Yeah.
And that goes all the way down to the pause menu.
Like.
So for those of you that are listening
Mm-hmm.
to the audio only program, I'm sorry. Joe and I watched a TikTok just before this show began, and there's a guy who's talking about the how they formed the pause menu music, and the guy walks in and he goes, "It's like, hey, we got a movie tie-in. We're not looking for anything crazy. Just need some low key music for the pause menu." And then the dude plays it, and like all of us felt the same thing when you hear the
Mm-hmm.
pause music for the first
What
time.
the fuck?
You're like,
Like.
what is this? This is amazing.
Yeah, it's some sort of like, I would say like trap version of like the 007 theme,
Yeah.
and like it went way harder than it ever needed
Oh,
to. Oh
it
man.
takes the best things of the 007 theme, but then
Mm-hmm.
it gives this like really intense but like low key beat,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, yeah, it's like you almost feel like you're in a lowrider and you're just kind of cruising along, and then with that N64 modified music interface, it
Mm-hmm.
sounds so
Jesus.
tacky but
Mm-hmm.
brilliant.
Yeah. It's
It's-
it's like I feel like it's everything great about the music of the decade,
yeah,
um, and that emergence of what would have been like techno, because we were switching from like the synth of the '80s to this that is
yeah.
that era's like heavily electronic music, um, and it was a fucking experience, man. Holy shit.
It was, and
Hmm.
that's why for me, there's very few games that get close to what this thing did, especially on the platform it was on.
Hmm.
And yeah, it gets a 5.0 for me, man.
Yeah. And this is ridiculous because I think this is going to be the highest scoring game we've ever done. Uh, because it's the music is the same for me. Like it does this great job of borrowing what it needs to from the movie. And that's also again part of the experience is that like we said before, when you play this game, you feel like you're a part of the movie. You feel like you're a spy. And a lot of that does have to do with them taking music from the movie and using it here. And every once in a while, when you press pause, you get to have this experience of them like putting a twist on the music every once in a while and somehow taking what's already good and retrofitting it and making it better with a modern music style. So again, it doesn't make sense how good it is, but it's 5 golden guns for me out of this one too. So this is the best. This is the highest game we've ever rated. It got 3 perfect scores out of 3 metrics for both of us.
Yep.
And then the one metric that was lowest was 4.5 for both of us. So we have finally dethroned the leader of this, which was, I believe, was that Star Fox? Was that the best one we had before?
Actually, so to date, it was actually The Walking Dead Season 1 by Telltale, which scored the highest. So 92.5 or 37 out of a possible 40 at that point in time. Walkers, right? But for Goldeneye, out of a possible 40 golden guns, we've got 39 for a percentage of 98%.
Wow.
Damn near perfection. And I think it deserves it, man. It does.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It just does deserve it.
Again, I think, this was, of the games we reviewed for so far, I think it makes sense. Because this was one where it was a generation-defining game. And when we say generation-defining, it's like platform generation-defining. And I don't think we've reviewed a platform defining game yet. We have definitely had very good games so far. Obviously with Tomb Raider and the Assassin's Creed and Donkey Kong, and maybe Donkey Kong. I guess maybe that was the closest with a generation-defying game for like the Super Nintendo.
Yeah. But not
again,
even.
Not even. No, because there were better titles on the Super Nintendo than Donkey Kong Country. But I mean, this is just, it's one of those things where if you had a 64, this was an absolute must-have game for it. And if you didn't have it, you really hoped one of your friends had it so you could have those Goldeneye nights where you were again shooting each other and you were trying to get like keeping your kills high enough so you didn't have to give up your controller.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, seriously, it was. Everything I look back to on this game was not just platform defining, but as far as consoles go, it probably was the most amount of time I spent playing games with other people. And I don't quite count MMOs in the same way because I spent countless hours in front of a computer playing that, don't get me wrong. But in front of a console, this was the game that brought people together no matter where I lived. For the better part of like 6 or 7 years. It just did. So, yes. So there it is, folks. Our retro review, GoldenEye 007. And with that, we want to thank you for listening to Digital Dissection. As always, we appreciate everything that the Dissection crew does for us week after week. Your support goes an incredibly long way. We can't thank you enough because we've had some very, very, very good weeks, week over week for this show. And as listenership improves, we do appreciate you working with us on some of the issues we've had in audio. We know it's there. Joe and I both know it's there at times. So, but you still keep listening. And so once again, we can't thank you enough. If you did happen upon this show by accident, which still sometimes happens, why not drop us a review or comment on the show? And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe just in general. But yeah, we love hearing from you. So feel free to message us at digitaldissectionpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear about your thoughts on GoldenEye and really any kind of spy stuff in general.
Yeah, or like maybe did you have one of the badass like different colored controllers for the N64 or one of the cool clear color N64 controllers? Tell us which one you had to see if it's cooler than my fire transparent N64 controller, because I doubt it was.
I had the green one actually, so
that's not bad. Not bad. Not fire, but not bad.
Yeah. Yep. Oh yeah. But hey, folks, feel free to share your future ideas for shows and anything else you'd like to discuss. And until next time, keep on dissecting.
And don't you dare fucking pick Odd Job.